All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I know folks are still coming into the room, into the space. Uh, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your presence tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are in the grand scheme of time and space. Welcome to Queering Spiritual Wellness. I am really excited and happy and delighted, I think is the word I want to use, to be present with you all virtually. Some of you may be watching a replay, a recording of this, and I want to say hello to you to prophesy because I know eyeballs are on the screen and ears are listening. So welcome. You are part of this conversation. This is a living, breathing moment, and I am delighted that you're here. My name is Leo Shage Allen, and I have the privilege and pleasure of serving as Minister of Faith and Justice at Virginia-Highland Church, United Church of Christ in Atlanta, Georgia. We are a progressive community of faith that believes Black Lives Matter, that women's rights are human rights, that children ought to be seen and heard, that love is love, that science is a gift from God, that people of all abilities, all faith and no faith are our siblings. We also believe that no human being is illegal on stolen land. And so I want to take this time to honor where I am. I'm not in Atlanta, but I'm currently on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee on Creek land. And I want to honor the indigenous lands where I sit today and the land where my ancestors toiled and worked and did not yet see the fruit of their labor. Thanks again for being here tonight. If you're tuning in live in real time in the Zoom space, I want to let you know that the chat box is yours. Please do introduce yourselves and let us know where you are, where you're coming from, how you're feeling today. Say hello. The same goes for Facebook. Let us know that you're here and present. I want to greet you and connect with you authentically as well. This new hybrid reality of virtual space across multiple platforms is here to stay. And I like it. So tonight, I think we have a really awesome conversation and an awesome opportunity to be in dialogue with one another. So you'll see me kind of as host facilitating our space, but I want those folks who are gathered to know that you are just as much a part of the conversation. If you hear something that pricks your heart, if you hear something that kind of makes you curious, let us know, type it in the chat and we can engage with you. So this is Queering Spiritual Wellness, and I want to go ahead and get started and introduce my wonderful co-facilitators, this panel of esteemed Christian leaders in the faith doing extraordinary work. And I am going to start with Reverend Aline Silva. Reverend Aline is serving as co-director of Creature Kind, which is in Portland, Oregon. Prior to coming to Creature Kind, Aline served for over a decade as a local parish pastor of rural and farming populations in Kansas, Missouri, and Colorado. Aline shares herself as a queer, Black, and Indigenous immigrant of Brazil in the United States. Aline chooses not to eat non-human animals, her fellow worshipers of God. Aline is a pastor, an excellent preacher, and a life coach. You can most often find her laughing out loud, twerking, and sharing her life with her emotional support pup and her main squeeze, Pasaka. Did I say that right? Pasaka? Yeah. You can learn about Aline and her work following Creature Kind on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I highly suggest you check out Creature Kind. Aline also writes from the unceded lands of the Tequesta, Taino, and Seminole peoples, namely in South Florida, USA. So welcome, Aline. I'm really glad that you're here. Next, I want to go ahead and introduce Myles Markham. You see Myles here. Myles uses he, him, or they, them pronouns, and he's a graduate of Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, which is where I am currently doing my wrapping up of the MDiv. Myles is an impact producer for Multitude Films. Recently, you may have seen a wonderful and really thought-provoking and heart-stirring documentary called Pray Away that came out on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, I'm gonna tell you right now, that needs to be the next thing you do. After you finish this conversation, get on Netflix or Multitude Films and find a way to stream that documentary because it is powerful and it is necessary. Myles serves as mission specialist for Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, which is the disaster response and refugee support ministry area of the Presbyterian Church USA. Thank you for being here, Myles. All right, next I want to introduce Keith Menhinick. Keith is a trauma chaplain and a PhD candidate. And I went ahead and said Reverend Doctor because we are claiming it now. It's already done. He's a PhD candidate in religion at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and a certified teacher of the community resiliency model with the Trauma Resource Institute. Keith's current research is centered on spiritual care, examining the intersections of racialized trauma and resilience in LGBTQ plus communities. He also works as the managing editor for the peer-reviewed journal Practical Matters and has experience as an interfaith hospital chaplain, children's home chaplain, church minister, and high school English teacher. Thank you, Keith, for being here. I'm glad that you are present with us tonight. And certainly not least is Minister Lauren D. Cunningham. Lauren uses she, her, hers pronouns, and Lauren is a minister and organizer with the Good Neighbor Movement, and it's based in Greensboro, North Carolina. I encourage you to follow these organizations. Good Neighbor Movement has some awesome content and work that they are doing and pushing out and that you can be a part of. A Good Neighbor Movement is an alternative faith community serving at the intersection of faith and justice. Fondly referred to as L, Lauren considers herself a curator of sacred space. As a contemplative artist, storyteller, and spiritual director in training, Lauren experiences the spirit through creativity and artistic expression, connecting deeply with others, the practice and process of critical reflection, and creating space for the transformative power of love, healing, and wholeness to emerge. Thank you, Lauren, for being here. So Aline, Myles, Keith, Lauren, welcome. Thank you for being here. We are gonna just jump right into some conversation. And I've got some questions that I am going to be in dialogue with these four esteemed panelists, but I also want you to know that there will be a time shortly for question and response. And so if you have questions that come up, you can add them into the chat. If you think about something as someone's speaking, you don't have to wait and hold that for a moment. Just slide it in the chat and I will see it and I'll make sure that we come back to it so that we can engage directly with you. So, queering spiritual wellness. Some people have contacted me and wonder, like, what in the world does that mean? Why that word? What is the intention behind that? And so I thought that it might be actually important for us to start with talking about who you all are as LGBTQ plus people, how you identify, and then beyond that, I'd like to tag on how does your sexual or gender identity impact your faith, your spirituality? So I'm gonna kick it to Keith, Reverend Dr. Menhinnick, and if you would just let us know again, how do you identify? What does it mean to you? Do you identify with the word queer? What is the language that you use? And how has that identity impacted your spiritual journey?
Thanks, Leo. So yes, I'm Keith he, him. I identify as cisgender male and kind of alternate between gay and queer, mostly because gay feels kind of restrictive sometimes. It feels like a male body attracted to a male body. And a lot of times I am wondering, what is a man? What constitutes maleness and masculinity? And I like pushing against those things and playing with them. I see gender as something to be played with. So queer uh, feels like more of a home to me. A lot of times there feels like there's more room. I have felt my own attractions and desires change and evolve and shift throughout my life. So queer to me kind of speaks to how we might name the fluidity of attraction and desire. And I would say the way that my sexual gender identity has impacted my spirituality is very much connected to that sense of queerness. If queerness kind of points to this nuance, this fluidity, things can change, things overlap, they fall back on itself, they progress, things evolve. I feel like that has been my relationship to spirituality, that, you know, I inherited this view of gender and of sexuality as binary. You're this or that. And typically that binary also maps onto good and bad. And that was also the way I inherited religion and spirituality, is there's like good religion, bad religion. And I will say, as a scholar, so much of the theological and psychological literature is still stuck in religion is all good, you know, queer people need religion, or it's all bad. Queer people need to leave religion. It's all harm, it's all trauma. And my own relationship to spirituality, just like my relationship to sexuality and gender, shows that it's not all good or all bad, but it's complicated, it's mixed. We hold sometimes ambiguous and sometimes contradictory truths all at once. So I find that to be true for the way I experience sexuality and the way I experience spirituality. But I think at the end of the day, what I have learned from my sexual and gender identity and spirituality is that there is more freedom, that the roles and identities that have been kind of pushed onto me, that there is just more freedom. There are more ways of being, of connecting, of thinking about myself. Like, I don't fully know who I am yet. That unfolds across a lifetime. And so I just think about that, not to be like too churchy, but I do think about that line, like, where the spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And that's really what I've kind of learned as a litmus test for both my faith and my gender and sexuality, is like, if I follow the freedom, like, other good things and truths unfold. So yeah, I would say faith then becomes less about self-denying and restricting, which is what it was for the first 20 years of my life. And faith for me now, spirituality, is about freedom and knowing that there's more freedom.
Wow, that's beautiful, Keith. Thank you so much. I want to pass it now to Aline and offer you some space for the same question. How do you identify, and how is your identity, particularly as an LGBTQ plus Christian, impacted your spiritual journey?
Yes, thank you, Leo, for opening the space. My pronouns are she, her, and Ella. Ella is Portuguese. And I identify as pansexual, and queer is very much a part of my vocabulary because, you know, as we have learned, and I am still learning, pansexuality falls under bisexuality, and what all of that means and how that is experienced even within the binary brother Keith was just talking about, can be hard on us. And so for me, using the term queer to identify to myself, to my sexuality, has been very liberative as well, because it has been more inclusive and more encompassing, and has allowed me to tap into what I think is the same creativity that God may have had in the beginning of it all, and imagine possibilities that before were shown to me as constraint. I'm lucky that in my adult life, I went to a seminary that was very affirming and very inclusive. And that, I think, is what taught me how to look at spiritual wellness and have a healthy spirituality. But before that, I come from Seventh-day Adventists and Roman Catholics. Nothing about what I was attracted to, and I never came out to my family as a kid, only in my adult life. So I knew that nothing that I was attracted to was okay in my family of origin, in the way that they expressed that, right? And so for me, it was in seminary that I found that I too was part of the Imago Dei. I found that I too was a part of God and that beautiful, good creation, and that I too belonged. And another part of that, which is important for me to say, is that neither in the Seventh-day Adventist Church or in the Catholic Church, women are, ordained. And so to be a leader in the church today and to go to a seminary that affirms being a high femme queer person who is also ordained for the word and sacrament of our Lord has been just very empowering for me.
Wow. I love all of this. Thank you, Aline and Keith, for what you all have shared. I'm going to toss it to you, Myles, and give you the same question. How do you identify? What does that mean? What does that identity mean to you in terms of your spiritual journey?
Sure. Thank you. Myles Markham, he, him, or they, them. I identify as transmasculine, non-binary, and for people who don't know or are newer, to either one of those phrases, for me, I don't mind disclosing my gender history. So I personally feel comfortable sharing that that means I was assigned female at birth and raised to be a little girl. And the expectation was that I would become a cisgender woman. And I always knew that there was more to the story. And so something I say as a non-binary person is that gender assignment was not wrong. It just wasn't complete. And so I think that from an early age, my experience of gender informed a hunger for spirituality, because I do think that religion and spirituality at its best opens us up to the transcendent. And I think that there is something really similar between religion and gender and sexuality, for that matter as well. And so in terms of orientation, I like queer for all the reasons that both Keith and Aline already named. I think that in addition to kind of representing a sense of personal identity, I like that it can also be representative of a community. It can be representative of a collective understanding and a collective politic. And so that to me is also something that is really exciting and generative. So that's why I like it. The other thing I'll share is that it's been really fun and interesting for me to kind of look back over the course of my life and try to figure out if it was my sexual and gender identity that informed my spirituality, or my spirituality that informed my sexual and gender identity. And I think ultimately the answer is that they were both happening simultaneously. But I do think that they complement one another and help me. They give me a lens to interpret the other, which is again, a fun and enjoyable thing for me. And I look forward, for that sort of thing to continue to deepen and expand throughout the rest of my life. I grew up in a more conservative evangelical variety of traditions, kind of across denominations, but I've never necessarily been pulled, to one expression of Christian faith or another. So yeah, still working that out. Post evangelical is one way I will talk about my spirituality, but we can get a little more into that later in the conversation. That's it. Thanks.
Love it. Thank you, Myles. All right, Lauren, same question to you, my friend. How do you identify? Does queer resonate with you, and how does your identity impact or influence your spiritual journey?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to offer some gratitude for this space. So, Leo, thank you so much for convening us and inviting us into this conversation. And I really appreciate all the reflections that have been shared thus far. So much of it resonates with me. I use she, her pronouns, and, queer is something that I started identifying myself as. Within the last 5 years. And it was an extremely liberating experience for me, because it opened up just like so much possibility. I really appreciate Keith naming the binaries that we are often, our society, when we say we, as a society that we operate in, we so quickly want to put a good, bad, right, wrong, heaven, hell, which restricts so much possibility. And I feel like that had taken root in me. The lack of imagination about who I am, who I was becoming, and lack of sacred curiosity about who God is. But I'm grateful for memories and the ability to remember, because I grew up in the Black Baptist faith tradition. My dad was a pastor and preacher. He was one of 9, 6 boys, 3 girls, and 4 of the 6 boys were pastors and preachers. My grandfather was a pastor. One of my uncles pastors the church that my grandfather pastored. So long line of Black Baptist preachers in Kentucky. And boy, I would grill him every Sunday about the why of God, the why of our existence, and the difference and the diversity and also challenge what I often heard is double speak. Nothing can separate you, but I heard the but in the sermons, and was just really curious about that in a honest way. And so I think remembering that sort of curiosity about God allowed me to remember that I'm the apple of God's eye, and I am continuing to learn about myself and evolve. And I think queerness allows for that possibility. It gives space. It it's given me a lot of space to explore my spirituality as well. So I just, it's kind of all wrapped up in one for me at this point. And I'm really grateful for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. I heard that siren go off. I don't know if it was you or if it was somebody else, but I heard a siren when you said apple of God's eye. And I was like, see, that was a praise break right there. Right there. Put a praise on it. Yes, Aline. I was like, yes, all of you are the apple of God's eye. And I'm so grateful that you're here. I just want to remind folks who may be tuning in or just joining us, welcome again to Queering Spiritual Wellness. If you have questions, if you have curiosities that rise up in you, at any time you can drop those in the chat box, and don't worry, I will come back to them. There will be a time for a question and response for a little Q&R a little bit later on. I want to move into a question about how you all do life and ministry, because each of you is in very particular vocational areas and is doing a very dynamic work. But I think that for folks who possibly grew up in the traditional Christian church, and I'm speaking more about Protestant or mainline churches in America, you all are in very unique and non-traditional ministry settings. So I want to come back to you, Lauren, and work our way through here. But I want to know, how did you choose where you do ministry right now, currently? Mm-hmm. And are people of queer and trans experience, are folks in the LGBTQ plus community a part of your ministry work? So I'm going to pitch that to you, Lauren.
Okay, thank you. So I'm based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I came on staff with the Good Neighbor movement at the January of 2020. So it was a unique entry into full-time ministry, because about 2.5 months later, the world got on fire. And so, yeah, that's there's a whole lesson and word in that. But we are a unique faith community. And I shared a little bit about my story growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, but I've been a part of several churches, have led in ministry, started doing like youth ministry when I was 17 years old. I've always been like community-based and community rooted. My dad was that type of preacher. I was telling a story about him in a training last week where, we were urban, small community church or a church community. And we would have, sex workers who were getting off work come into the church. And I watched every move that my dad made in ways in which he invited them in. And so I say that to say that I've been a part of ministries where I've been asked to leave. I've been set down when I have been open about my sexuality or sexual identity. And working with a queer, open, and affirming alternative faith community that is working at the intersection of faith and justice, that's rooted, that's decentralized, that we're organized in a way that puts us right in the neighborhoods of our community. We center queer folks, but not only that, we're Black led. We're honest about the work that we do and why we do it, and invite people to just to stand in their full dignity, to be who they are. And so my ministry work with Good Neighbor movement, I feel like it's the only type of church that I could officially be a part of. I mean, for real, at this point in my life, right? So yes, it is the right ministry. And I don't know if I chose it, but it chose me. I mean, we had some, it was mutual. We chose each other, and I'm really grateful for that. And so a lot of my work specifically is around community care and holding space. And because I am who I am, I spend one-on-one time and small group time with lots of queer people in our community and look to support in any way I can. I always appreciate the invitation to journey with queer folks, especially BIPOC queer folks in the community. And so I still consider myself like really putting down roots. But this year I got married, and my wife and I are just, we are really excited about the next leg of this journey together here in Greensboro. And I know there's just so much good work to do. So yeah, I think that's a good starting point about Good Neighbor Movement.
Yes, indeed. And congratulations. You still fresh in it, fresh in marriage. Thank you, Lauren. Myles, I want to pass it to you. Tell me a little bit about how you found yourself in your current ministry setting or settings, and are LGBTQ people a part of your work? And if so, how?
Yes, I appreciate the plural there, because if my ministry is a ministry of anything, it's a ministry of attention deficit disorder. And I find myself spread across several different fields, you could say. And I guess maybe I'll just touch on each one, starting with the one I'm the most passionate about. And that is been a more recent development, and it's working with television and film. And so right now that is mostly in the documentary space, but I began doing a little bit of work with some narrative series and animated narrative series. And that is something that is really exciting and generative for me. And I love it because I've always been a person who is compelled by story. I love to hear stories. I love to share stories. My life has been transformed specifically through that medium in countless ways. And so it's been a really surprising but natural fit for me to move in that direction. I had been working for years in, professional queer and trans faith organizing and doing a lot of education on that front as well. And I wasn't really sure how that was going to transfer into the media space, but I just think that it's so fun to be a part of developing audio, and visual experiences for people, and it's because of the way that is grounded in story. So that's increasingly the direction I would like to be moving, but it is right now just a part of my kind of vocational world. The second piece I'll mention is with the Presbyterian Church USA. So I work for the denomination. I work specifically in disaster response, which, if folks don't know, at least the way that the Presbyterian Church conceptualizes disaster is both natural and human caused. And so I'm doing a lot of work with grant support, but the PCUSA also has its own documentary program. And so I'm getting to kind of apply that story loving part part of me into the disaster response work, but I'm also doing a lot, woefully a lot of administration. And I know that for some people, that is their gift, that is their call. It is not mine. And yet, it is how I spend a lot of my time right now. And unfortunately, I don't get to be around queer and trans people as much as I would like in this sort of space. That's not to say that there are not queer and trans people doing really cool work in disaster response, specifically when it comes to resisting something called disaster capitalism. And we could get into that, another time. But in as far as the PCUSA is concerned, we're still just beginning our work and kind of pushing up against sort of these colonial ways of thinking about benevolence and thinking about supporting communities living through disaster and trauma. So that, again, that's one bucket of work. But then the sort of third piece of this is more of a interpersonal and maybe even like pastoral way of orienting myself to queer and trans Christians and parents and families too, as well, who are newer kind of in their exploration of these topics. I do work a lot with people who are really struggling with the Bible. And so that is something that I do love. Scripture is also a fun thing for me. And a part of having fun, I do think too, is having this kind of ongoing and really sobering recognition of how lethal like these texts have been for so many people. And so there's a kind of reclamation part of that ministry, I think, that is really exciting for me. And that is almost exclusively, if not working with queer and trans people specifically, I'm working with queer and trans topics and really trying to demonstrate there's a way to integrate all of our identities. So yeah, those are the three main containers of ministry work I have. But yeah, I'm curious to see kind of where this goes and if I can focus. I guess that's what I'm looking for in the future. That's it.
I hear you on the administrative piece. I kind of like it sometimes, but I feel like it is one of those fruit of the spirit, where you just can't get all of them at once. You're never doing all the things. So, I feel you on that. But thank you so much for sharing about all the areas of ministry that you're working in right now. All right, Aline, what and how and why did you find yourself working with this kind of unique ministry setting, and are LGBTQ people a part of your work?
Yes. Thank you for raising this question, and it caused me to go into a deeply uncomfortable place in my ministry, but memory is good so that we don't repeat the same things in the future, right? But you mentioned that I served as a local pastor in rural and farming Midwest United States. But I served white moderates, and the white moderates I'm talking about here are the same ones that MLK talks about, right? And so for 10 years, I served this population. And after the election of 45, I decided that I no longer wanted to work for white progressives. And so I decided to come to Creature Kind. And Creature Kind specifically works with Christians around the question, does God care about the well-being of farmed animals? And if so, what is this industry doing to the people, those who work there, those who work around that industry, those who consume and raise the animals, including food insecure people, many of whom are queer folks, right? And Also, what is the industry doing to our shared earth? And might our communion or community table be one of equity, not only for the people who are at the table, but the people who are on the table, or the beings who are on the table, and those who are supplying the table as well. And I think that our belief and our faith is most effective when put into practice. And this has been so important to me because as an immigrant from Brazil, we know that the vast majority of field workers, of people who work in slaughterhouses and people who work in the food supply chain are born south of the border, many of whom are undocumented persons. We have also seen the rise of COVID-19 cases rise in meat and packing industries, right? As a woman of color, I think especially of African and Native American descent born in Brazil, it's important to consider that even though we are responsible for most of what is produced in agriculture, we get very little of the financing, we get no economic benefits. And so as a person who identifies as a woman, that's very, very important to me, especially considering that, but especially as a queer person, it is just incredible to me that we are continuing to supply and demand from an industry that mutilates bodies that don't fit the colonized gender binary or stance. Meaning, if you are born a male calf or a male baby chick, what happens to you because you don't fit that? For me, it also means questioning an industry that has easy access to hormones and antibiotics for cents on the dollar for 70 plus billion land animals when we cannot provide hormone therapy for my trans siblings. Cents on the dollar, folks, for animals that cause disease, but we can't provide universal healthcare for all, let alone the most vulnerable or marginalized, or even a vaccine patent for overexplored communities that were purposefully left out and made even more vulnerable during the pandemic. So, the social and communal question of, is it possible to meet at the communion table and make it liberative for all, is very, very important to me. And it was not a question that white moderates were willing to answer. It was not a question that they were willing to face on. But it was a question that they were willing to do a lot of charitable work around, a lot of soup kitchens and food pantries around, but they were never able to look at the food system as a whole, who are being harmed the most, and raise the question, does God care? And who are the people and animals and other creature kind beings that are being damaged by this industry? And so for me, after 10 years of that, I just couldn't live in that theory anymore. I had to put it into practice. And so today, some of you knew creature kind before I came along, but I would say today, before I came along, there was a team of 2 people. Now we have a team of 7 people, most of whom are Black, brown, queer people. We also have a fellowship of folks who are either seminarians or people who are considering lifelong ministry in the church, who are queer folks and are, thinking of relevant ways to serve their community. And so that's how I do ministry today, which is kind of shocking to me because I went to seminary thinking that I knew it all. And I was going to be like that star person on the pulpit. And, the pulpit is the only thing that gets people saved, whatever. But then I got saved and then got to know better. So that's a little bit about me and my ministry.
Wow. See, y'all are taking me to church. In this space, we are queering church as we speak. Thank you so much, Aline. And I'm just hearing these threads through the stories so far that have been shared from you all. And I'm coming to my brother Keith, but I'm just hearing threads of queer folks that you're working with, queer creatures of all kinds, folks who maybe don't necessarily think of queerness outside of LGBTQIA plus, but you're kind of breaking the mold for us and really tapping into what this conversation tonight is about. So thank y'all so much. Keith, I want to pass it to you, Reverend Dr. Menhinnick. What brought you to the area or areas of ministry that you're in now? And do you work with trans and queer folks?
Thank you for the question. So I was born a son of a Baptist. So I have just grown up in the Southern Baptist Church in North Carolina, and church life has always just been near and dear to me. And so I would say to this day, I still feel very invested in the local church. I'm at Park Ave Baptist Church here in Atlanta, where I preach and teach and serve and just help out as much as I can. In my past, when I lived in North Carolina, I was a minister at College Park Baptist Church down the street from Lauren, and that's where I was ordained. So whether I'm doing it vocationally or like as a career for money or as a volunteer, I do feel very invested in the life of the local church community, just building community, having a place for people to connect and belong. When I went to divinity school, I was working as a chaplain at a children's home. And when I came out as gay, I had to leave that children's home. It was Southern Baptist based. And so at that point, I kept with my career in chaplaincy. I got certified, went through several different credentialing stuff through CPE and other ways. So I worked as a trauma chaplain at a pediatric hospital for several years. And that really just, working in the emergency room, the ICU, and the psych unit just opened my eyes to how much trauma is out there for all of us. Like, so many people are just walking around with it. And so really what I've invested myself in these past few years, both, as a scholar at Emory working on my PhD, but also like as just like a community member and practitioner, is I've really just developed my own skills in trauma-informed care and resiliency-focused care. So a lot of what I do now is teaching through the Trauma Resource Institute, what they call the community resiliency model. So this is a community-based and body-based model of care that really highlights our inherent resiliency. Not that we are broken and traumatized, but that we are inherently powerful. And we have resources, all of us, in us that we can draw on. And so that's what I'm really passionate about, is bringing that to the community. So over the summer, I had the privilege of training over 300 people with the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. This past week, I was working with some local public school systems. I've trained chaplains at different VA hospitals from North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, just in trauma-informed and resiliency-focused care. And the focus of my dissertation is bringing all of that to the lives of queer folks, LGBTQ folks. And instead of asking, how might we care for queer folks, which is what a lot of the literature does, I'm kind of asking, what might queer folks teach us about care? So I'm just kind of turning the question a little bit. Instead of care for, care with LGBTQ folks, what might queer folks teach the rest of us about what forgiveness means? In fact, I think queer folks have a lot to teach the church about forgiveness and family and spiritual practice and community. And so that's really the work of this dissertation right now, which I hope to be finished with in May, and it will be published as a book. So forthcoming.
Halle, we claim it now. And Keith, I'm really just excited about the work you're doing and that all of you all are doing. This is just fantastic. And once again, I see a couple of questions and we are certainly going to get to you. Thanks for engaging with us. If you have something that comes up in your spirit and your psyche, please do type it into the chat and we will come to that during our Q&R. So let's talk about spiritual practices. Now, y'all know I had to bring this up. We're talking about spiritual wellness, but that is a hot buzzword. Not a new word, but it's a hot term right now. And I think it's important for us as we're discussing this, and you have touched on a lot already, but it's important for folks to understand how trans and queer people of the Christian faith um, are using spiritual practices to build that resiliency that Keith and others have talked about. Um, so I want to start with Myles and just tell me about some of your spiritual practices and maybe how they have changed or evolved over time for you. Um, and there's a little kind of additional question to this that you can think about in tandem, which is if you grew up in a tradition or a denomination that was not affirming, what are the spiritual practices that you've taken from those traditions and maybe even reclaimed or reused in a new way? So let's start with Myles.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this question because I think it is so important. And to me, like one of the most redemptive parts of growing up, even in a conservative religious tradition to me, is that from a very early age, you are introduced to the concept of ritual. And I do think even if a person grows up religious and that ends up being a kind of way of being in the world that doesn't work for them, I do still think that ritual is such an important part of health and wellness for all people, independent like of religion. So yeah, I guess I did grow up in an evangelical sort of way of relating to Christianity, and I know for a lot of people that there is nothing good for them to take for those environments, and in fact, their religious or spiritual trauma is such that um, they're deeply triggered, even just by the sight, or smells, associated with churchy kinds of spaces. But that is not my experience. And so, for example, I will never not love gospel and contemporary worship music. There is something so powerful to me, both kind of at the like neurobiological level, but as well as a more sort of metaphysical, way as well when it comes to music, when it comes to my body, like engaging with like these frequencies and being able to sing and to sing with other people. Like the communal practice of singing is so important to me, and it always has been. And I just don't have that same sort of experience when it comes to hymns and choral music. I know for others this is different. It is not my story, and I struggle. I can appreciate the beauty that other people appreciate, but it's not for me. Another thing that I've maintained is a prayer life, and it's not just uh, praying out loud or praying like silently, but just thinking about communication with the divine. Like that is something that is still really valuable to me. So I'm a big journaler. I do that. But I also really think about like the spiritual lives of like the created world around me. And that's where work like Aline's has been so formative for me, is that I think about the life, of the world around us, plant and animal, as the living things, that we get to share, breath with. And I think along those same lines, like meditation is still something that is really valuable to me, something that I incorporate. And I know that being quiet or still for a while for some people is uncomfortable or doesn't work, but I love it. There is something really special that happens for me, I think, in participating in intentional meditation. And I can go a long time in that kind of space, and experience that to be healing. And the last thing I'll mention is that I have really grown to value just like more intentional like body work and thinking about somatics and like what we're doing and feeling and experiencing. And one of my favorite practices is swimming and being in water, surfing. I'm Native Hawaiian, and the Pacific Ocean specifically is something that I think serves as like a grounding source to me. It's something that I think really shapes also like my feminism, is my relationship to the ocean. And that is also, a critical part of my spirituality. And so that too is something that has been a part of my life for a very long time. And now that I have more like liberative theology to accompany those practices, I think it's allowed me to kind of go deeper into them. So yeah, there's more, but those are the ones that I'm sharing tonight.
I love that. And yeah, I join you in that around water. I mean, that baptism has always been just a very queer thing to me. And I still haven't wrapped my head around it, probably never will, but there is something that is very maternal and feminine and nurturing and even scary about the water and water. So, yeah, thanks for all of those, Miles. I do want to remind folks that you can use the chat box and drop in questions. I'm even curious as we're going uh, ahead about some of your own spiritual practices. So if you're listening in real time, let me know what some of those are. But I want to move to Keith and give you the same question. What are your spiritual practices right now, and how have they maybe changed or evolved for you in recent time?
Yeah. Well, not to copy and paste from Miles, but I resonate with a lot of what you said. I will say I see church as a practice, as a spiritual practice, more than a place or something like that. So, communal gathering, this communal music and worship, communal prayer, these are practices that sustain me. And even when theologically or intellectually, I have a million disconnects, I will walk into a church and a beautiful prayer or song will make me cry. And I may, that morning feel like I don't believe anything. And yet I'll walk in and just feel so held and nurtured by it. So I do see church and a lot of the things that comes with that as a spiritual practice, that it's something we do with our bodies. And like Miles, I also see just communing with nature as a practice as well. So at any given point, especially when it's warm, I love to go hiking, just be out in the woods. I'm an avid camper. So I'm actually supposed to go camping this coming weekend, Halloween weekend, if it's not too cold. I love fire pits under the stars at night. I had one last night in my backyard, coffee in the morning on the porch. And it's often like, on the back porch underneath the tree where I'm doing my journaling, which is another practice where I'm just writing out my prayers, writing out my hopes, my fears, whatever. And then something that I inherited from my evangelical Southern Baptist upbringing was scripture memorization. And that is really something that I've kept. So I still, try weekly to put something to memory, even if it's just like a line or a couplet, or sometimes it's a whole passage. And it's not always canonical scripture. Sometimes it's poetry. So this week, the phrase that I've been trying to memorize, and it's also my way of just praying it and meditating it, carrying it with me throughout my days. But the one that I've been memorizing this week is a couplet from Rumi that says, "Your task is not to seek love, but to seek all the barriers that you have built up against it." So I just like to carry little things like that around with me. And that really is a spiritual practice that I got from the Southern Baptists, that I still keep to this day. So yeah, that's a handful. I have more. I'll say also yoga. Yoga as a queer person was really transformative for me when I came out, in helping me learn to trust what desires are from God and which desires in my body are not. So yoga became a way for me to really feel in my body, connected to my body, and to discern what are the desires sexually, physically, emotionally that God has given me. So I still find yoga super helpful.
Thank you, Keith. And I'm glad that you touched on the physical and sexual desires. Bishop Yvette Flunder in the UCC would say, all my stuff is good. And claim that that yoga, she would affirm you in that as a spiritual and sensual, way of connecting with the divine. So thank you. Yeah, I'm looking, y'all are dropping in some really awesome spiritual practices in the chat. Erica Rencher, a good friend of ours, Lauren, someone we know in our circles, just so happened to be in the space. Thank you, Erica, saying currently some of Erica's spiritual practices, listening to music, breath or breathe prayers, it looks like, regularly gathering with people, exercise. Exercise needs to be one of my spiritual practices. Pray for me, pray for me. Rachel says, hey, Rachel, journaling once a week. Rachel says they do, queer Monday night dinner. Rachel, we got to do that. Rachel's one of my colleagues at Columbia, y'all, so I get the privilege of being in community with them in academic life too. And text groups with folks who see me. Love it. Thank y'all. Keep those coming. So Lauren, I want to toss it to you. Tell me about your spiritual practices and if they've changed or evolved for you.
Mm-hmm. They certainly have changed. I feel like a big piece of my story that I didn't offer earlier was that my journey to this point came after 15 years in higher education. I thought that that's what I was going to do, was continue to kind of make my way up the higher ed ladder. And that's actually what moved me to Greensboro, was a job here at a local university. And so when those things when it didn't work out, what signaled me to Spirit's call to move was Tracy Chapman. And the song Change. What if everything you think you know makes your life unbearable? Would you change? And that was just one of those moments where I had to pay attention. Pay attention to what was happening in my body, what was happening in my mind and in my heart. And like the line, it's one of my favorite songs, but that line would not go away. Like I just couldn't leave it alone. And it was like, what are you being called to pay attention to? What are you being called to pay attention to? And I was in a pretty toxic situation. And a part of my transformation over the last 5 years was realizing that everything I thought I knew was making my life unbearable. And there was a change that needed to happen. And so I resigned from my position in an act of protest and said, all right, let's see. And that's why I officially broke up with the institution of higher education. I value institutions of higher education. I've taught adjunct and would do it again. Nothing there. But there was something about my connection to institutions that was killing me. And I needed to be curious about that. And in order to create space, interior space, over the last 5 years, there's been a cultivation of practices that I'm deeply committed to. So in my bio, I said artistic expression. I just did a value sort with my therapist, and I'm like really on this whole thing right now, like how my values have shifted so much and how that shapes my commitments. And creativity and artistic expression is my number one value. And of course, I can see all the through lines. But when it comes to spiritual practices, being able to engage in meditative art practices. So I have all types of stuff here at the house now. I paint cards, I draw, I'm doodling all the time. I mean, I'm really leaning into this practice of being still and being quiet and allowing the pen, the paint to do the work, to be the vehicle. And I've done community-based arts with youth and so on and so forth, but so it's not new, but it's a new noticing. And that has just come from slowing down, spiritual practice. Saying no, spiritual practice. Stillness, quiet, meditation. As I am working my way through a spiritual direction certification program, I had to commit to like a rule and rhythm of life. That level of accountability. If something needs to be decided quickly, I'm probably not the one. There's a level of deliberation with things. There's a noticing. Like you notice the sirens, I notice the sirens. My dear sister on this call, Erica Rencher. We meet regularly. That's a spiritual practice. Being out in nature. I tell people, I feel like time in nature saved me in 2020. I notice things now that it taught me about life and death, life after transgression, had me Googling mosquitoes to figure out their significance in this ecosystem. I did find out they're a pollinator, so they are important. They don't just bite us. So, like there's been this deep curiosity for me around connection and my connection to living things, my connection to things that are no longer living in the form that they were living in before. Ancestral practice. We have a home altar here. I've had some powerful moments there. But all of it has taken shape in me because I've worked really hard to cultivate the space, the interior space. And one of the things, one of Good Neighbor Movement's value is be still. Four values that anchor us, and that's belong, become, be bold, be still. and we lean into contemplative activism. And I lean into contemplative artivism. That deep going in and excavation so I can go out and do the justice work. And so, I mean, I could go on about spiritual practices all day. Rest, yes, rest is a form. I'm going to sleep. I feel like that's a form of resisting, capitalism. I don't have to earn to go to the beach. The ocean was there before us and will be there after us. But there are ways in which being in nature, being quiet. And then the last thing I'll say, my sacred word is water. That's my sacred word. When I go to the ocean, I call Mother Ocean. I have a tree up at a park, Lake Daniel Park, right up the street from my house. I call it Mother Tree. I sit in Mother Tree. I cry in Mother Tree. We commune together. But the ocean, the water, that's my sacred word. And I pray often to be like water. I think that's my ministry. I want to be like water. Be like water. Get in the cracks.
Listen.
Passage. All the things. Like, okay, so I'm gonna start there. Singing. I'm a singer. I'm a singer.
Yes.
So just really holding all of those things allows me the spaciousness to fully be present with people and be present with myself. And that is how I experience God most deeply. So thank you for asking that question.
You're taking us to church, minister, again, in queering church. And I am just loving this. I feel poured into, and I hope that the folks who are present with us or watching later are feeling that too, that energy, even through these devices and such. Aline, I want to bring it home with you. Tell me, Aline, what are some of your spiritual practices today? How do they speak to you?
I think I want to share about 3 of them and then focus on one that has maybe taught me the most. But I would say movement. For me, Afro-Brazilian dance and drumming and yoga are both ancestral practices. And so I spend lots of time there. The second would be community, but especially queer BIPOC community. And I should have mentioned in the beginning, whenever you asked for us to share about our identity, as a queer pansexual, I am politically and relationally polyamorous, but romantically monogamous, meaning to love and be loved in community by my own folk, and to share food as Sister Ellen White, the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, made it for us, is so important to receive love and to be loved communally is a spiritual practice for me. And the third is smoke. Now, my people are smokers, meaning makers of fire and smoke and smudgers. And so being around healthy smoke as I pray is really important to me. And it reminds me of my Catholic family and being in church and smelling that during the times of prayers. And I didn't understand. I thought the priest was like swinging his purse around. It turns out the dress and the purse were not to be swung around. There was meaning behind that. But yoga has taught me to be present And this is really, really hard for me because I love to have fun and escape and to feel good things. And yoga has really taught me to be present with my breath, which is the spirit inside of me, who's also God inside of me, right? And this has helped me return to scripture because, after all, isn't God with us? And so being present with the God in us, in me, has been, I think, instrumental in not only my survival as a queer person who comes from a tradition that didn't honor my identities, but also my thriving in today's world. I can sit with the hard stuff now. I don't need to have all of the answers. I can also sit with the discomfort and responsibility of being uncomfortable, and I can be held accountable, right? When I sit with myself, which I think leads me to another spiritual practice that takes me back to my childhood, which is one of confession. Owning when I have missed the mark has been incredibly liberative for me, my community, and those that I work with. So being able to hold responsibility, hold love, hold accountability in discomfort has been really significant to me. So those are some of the things I would say.
Wow. Wow. I think there's so much to be gleaned from what you all have said and shared. And that last one, Aline, wow, that's something that I think I um, want to practice and cultivate. And I hadn't thought about that in the way that you framed it. Queering confession and what that means. I think that's, wow, that's good. That's good grist for the mill, is what my grandmama would say. Um, all right, so we of course are in this Kairos moment, and when Kairos moment happens, you know that there's never enough of it, and we're pushing up on our Western colonized understanding of time, and so we can't stay here forever. Not physically, but we can be present in spirit. And so I want to move us to kind of wrap up just a little bit, but I want to acknowledge just a couple of questions in the chat before we do. And I'm just going to toss it out to you all, and then we'll move to our final question. But I saw one come in from John Burton, who's part of our VHC family. And thank you again to my church community, Virginia-Highland Church, for hosting tonight, and Atlanta Pride Committee for giving us the resources to do this. John, I want to kind of pick just a little bit because there's a lot in here and it's good. But John is asking how he can approach leading an organization, a fraternity that is multicultural and intergenerational, but does not allow gay folks. What should his message be? So that's thank you for sharing that, John. Anybody got anything they want to offer in response to that?
I have just like a general thought, because I think the first thing I'll say is, before that general thought, is that every context is different. And so this particular fraternity has I'm assuming, a history. Yeah, and there's a reason at some point in time, whatever they say that reason is, that they made this policy against having gay folks join. And so, because that is true, I do think there's a lot of important information that one can gather from figuring out, like, why is that policy? Where did it come from? Why has it been upheld? Who are the people who are really committed to maintaining that? But the second, more general reflection I have on any kind of change, heart and mind change work anybody's ever trying to do in an organization or institution is, I think you have to demonstrate how the change you want to make is in alignment with this, I think he said, fraternity's values? How does it speak to who they already are for them to change this policy? How does it help them better live into the existing organizational identity? Because that is going to be what resonates, is if people can see that changing their mind about this and changing the policy is an extension of who they are. It's what it means to grow and to mature and to become the next best version of themselves. So that's just the kind of general piece of advice I would offer.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Myles. Thank you,
Offer
John,
a
for the
thought
question. Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
too, if that's okay. Yes, so I really love this question because I get it a lot, and I remember wrestling with it before I came out. In undergrad, I was a member of an organization that was actively discerning what to do about this. And I was a part of the conversations as a straight person, and later came out as gay. So my initial thought is I've been in these conversations about organizations wanting to change their policy, and I've been the closeted gay person in the room, pretending to be straight to be included in the conversations to begin with. So I just want to hold that out there, that there very well may already be gay people or people with non-heterosexual desires, feelings, attractions, whatever in the group. And I'll also say I've been a part of I will say, as much as the church has hurt me, the church has also been a part of my healing. The first time I found a progressive, affirming, celebrating church, it was within my first like 2 months of attending. This was College Park in Greensboro. We were protested. We had all the people outside with the horrible signs, yelling things as we came in. And I remember what all of our like straight male deacons did was form like a line between the protesters and the parking lot and the sidewalk so that people could walk into the church and feel safe. And that moment, like I could probably cry if I let myself, because that moment was just like forever ingrained in my heart as a moment of healing. And it was a moment that came from straight people advocating and celebrating me. So I feel like as much of the work is following queer people, taking initiative from queer people, Black people, brown people, I also found so much of my healing from the advocacy of straight Christians who didn't have to be invested and yet chose to be. And that was so much of my own personal healing. So I just want to say you're already probably doing amazing work and helping lots of people by holding these questions close.
Thank y'all both for that. And I want to move to another question that I'm going to make this a combo. Okay, so there's some really good stuff here around folks who are in ministry or stepping into ministry. So Diette asked Myles specifically about you, how you were worked to be accepted in the Presbyterian Church because she was tossed out because of being a woman loving another woman. And then there was a question, John, following up about how to support a married minister. Did I just combine lesbian and minister? Married lesbian minister who's graduating seminary, who's getting ready to go into church ministry and encounter some ugly folks. So I want to kind of combine those into two. And I definitely want you to chime in, Myles, and then one other person if you want to speak. But how would you all say, or what would you all say is some sage wisdom and advice for folks who are kind of particularly in church ministry that is non-affirming, how to survive that?
I can go quick with the Presbyterian question. And first, I want to say that what happened to you is heartbreaking and shouldn't have been the case. I think that it's very easy to minimize how harmful that experience can be. And I don't want to do that. So I just want to validate that what happened was wrong and shouldn't have been that way. The second part of the question, or answer response rather, is that the Presbyterian USA church, there's lots of different Presbyterian denominations. PCUSA, though, has at the denominational level a welcoming and affirming statement. And so they believe in complete affirmation of LGBTQ people in all the life of the church. However, they do not enforce that on the local church level. So you can remain a part of the PCUSA denomination and receive as a congregation all the resources that come with that and have a different policy than the denomination itself, for better or for worse. In this case, obviously for worse. So yeah, that's the PCUSA, and it's why things like what happened to you, unfortunately.
And I want to blend a little bit of that question and open it up for Lauren, Aline, Keith, if you all want to respond. Because there is someone who is, two folks. I see, I think it's Delilah, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong, and Merrick, who mentioned, reconciling with spiritual communities after experiencing harm, after experiencing trauma. Merritt in particular is asking for advice on reincorporating spirituality after coming out as trans and queer. Oh yeah, I got it right. Thank you, Delilah. Yeah, so that's kind of similar to a question that I really wanted to use to wrap our conversation tonight for the moment. And again, thank you for all the questions. If we didn't get to everything, I will send them out to our panelists. And if they're able, we'll see if we can get some responses to you, because this is a conversation that is living and breathing, as I mentioned at the beginning. But those two questions kind of can be, I think, framed contextually in a question about resources, people, organizations. What are the things that have helped you all along your pilgrim journey? Keith, come on. The Baptist hymn gonna come out. I know Myles is probably like, oh, okay. But I'm curious about the resources and things that have helped you all. And specifically, though, as Delilah and Merritt have asked, to deal with reconciling yourself, your personhood to spiritual communities. What has helped you? And I want to start, if we can, with Aline.
I would say communing with other churchy, queer, BIPOC folks. I would, warn against trying to reconcile with a community that has harmed you unless they have actually done the work of repenting, reconciling, and now repairing the relationship. And so I think those are steps that need to be made. But for you to reconcile your spirituality, I think that queer BIPOC people we're just the best. Like the accountability, the grace, the drip, the abundance of love and creativity is just unmatched. So come on over, babe. I can't sing, y'all, but there you go. No, but I think Leo mentioned Bishop Yvette Funder. She is my pastor, and she pastors City of Refuge. I mean, incredible work there, and has been very affirming of our journey. Another kind of group is oriented to love. It's actually a dialogue out of Christians for Social Action now, I think is their new name, which calls folks from all kinds of walks and faiths and backgrounds to have a conversation on queerness in the church. I would also say, a personal friend of mine is Pastor Jarrell Wilson, who's now in Michigan, who was the very first person to lead me to the altar confessing my pansexuality without shame and with much hope. So I think it's not so much a resource, but it's an abundance of resources inside of queer Christian community. That's the first place that I would set folks.
Awesome. Thank you, Aline. Let's see. Lauren, I'll pass it to you. What are the resources or people or organizations that have helped you or that might help someone in reconciling their selfhood, their identity?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's so much wisdom in your own experience, and so if I think that we embody, and so when I think about like somatics practice, if there's someone a practitioner near you, that could be a place to start. But I think what I really want to say is, James Baldwin talks about finding a community of love to recline into, and I think your community and practicing with your community is a form of experiencing church, is a form of definitely spirituality, and then again, just being really honest with yourself and with, all of us around ways in which we experience spirit, and really like mining that. Some of my teachers and guides are my community members. So while I can name some national networks and things like that, it's truly the people that I'm doing daily life with. It's so yeah, that community of love, naming where you experience spirit, and yeah, just hopefully like looking around you. I don't feel like I answered this question very well, but I'm just trying to answer it as genuinely as possible based off my experience. So I hope that's helpful.
That's good. That's good, Lauren. Thank you. Keith, and then Myles. Some resources, people, organization, things that have helped you in reconciling and moving through and becoming resilient after spiritual trauma.
Yep. I want to just reiterate what Aline said earlier about part of my process has been grieving communities that I am still unreconciled with. And that is not my decision, but it's been a part of my spiritual practice of setting boundaries and chasing my own resilience and like following the fruits of the spirit. So I will just say, I agree with that advice about just knowing how to keep yourself safe and not feeling the burden to take on the work of reconciling with a community that doesn't want all of you. That being said, I have joined groups and created groups of belonging and community. So some of the ones I've joined, church has just always felt good to me. It just has. So I am one to, as soon as I move to a new city, I will speed date a ton of churches until I find one, and it doesn't have to be perfect. My mantra for finding a church is a place that values participation over perfection. So to me, like, that's how I know it's like a healthy community for me, is people are invited to participate fully, and the standard is not perfection. I am a part of a hiking meetup. I was a part of that in North Carolina. When I moved to Georgia, they didn't have like a LGBTQ and allies hiking meetup. So I just started one. When I organized those, we have 20 plus people. So that's been a fun way to get to know people. And then another thing that's been meaningful to me is I have just with 3 other friends, we do this interfaith, interreligious book group where we meet once a month and we read different texts from around the world. So one of my friends is Hindu. So our next book is the Bhagavad Gita, and we're just reading it together and just talking it out. So that is like a little church, a little community of spirituality and practice. So I'm all for, oh, I also Google things a lot. So I joined this queer yoga class that I Googled and found here in Atlanta. So I do think Google can be a resource for finding communities and for also creating them when you want to. So, and I've done that just from hitting up friends, word of mouth, and then also through the Meetup app. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Keith, for all of those things. And Myles, certainly not least of all, I value what you have to offer to this. What's been helpful for you on the journey?
Yeah. Similar to what Keith just shared, the meetup concept has been critical. Just having other people to do life things with. And I usually find groups, that share similar interest or identities through Google. That's the main way I've always done that. I'll say finding other LGBTQ organizations has been key, and volunteering, becoming active in those communities, attending events and that sort of thing, whether they be online or in person. I had the opportunity to work for an LGBTQ Christian organization that produced resources, everything from like small books to like literal pamphlets, that we would hand out about the Bible and LGBTQ inclusion. And I've also done some work with HRC, the Human Rights Campaign around Bible, LGBTQ Bible education toolkits and that kind of thing. So those things are out there. They exist for people who are really again, trying to wrestle with the Bible stuff. But I will say that some of the best resources for me came through seminary. So I love reading. I know reading is not everybody's thing, but finding liberation theologies, and specifically Asian feminist, mujerista, womanist theologies, post-colonial theologies, especially scholars who are writing on the kind of popular level. So it's not just like a textbook that you're engaging with. Those have been so key. I think, again, though, that's because I like reading. I know there are podcasts out there. There are so many different ways of kind of engaging these materials. But again, cannot stress that to having in person connections, people who you can share your whole life with, like that's the best resource as you wrestle and journey on. And Google is your friend. If you don't know where to start Googling, I'm also happy to share my email and be a conversation partner and share those resources by name if you want.
Fantastic. Thank you, Myles. And I'm going to just take a moment of privilege and say that for those who are watching or listening, you all are in a really lovely, fantastic company with Myles and Lauren and Keith and Aline. And it's my prayer that you've gotten something out of this conversation and that you're ready to continue the conversation, be it on a screen or face to face, that you are thinking about things and that maybe seeds have been planted that are stirring something up in you. I've certainly been poured into. I'm so grateful for you all. We could be here all night and have church. But then we have other things to do. But this conversation is really going to be sustenance for me, and it resonates deeply in my spirit. And I just want to say thank you. I have so much gratitude to each of you, Myles Markham, Reverend Aline Silva, Minister Lauren Cunningham, Reverend Dr. Keith Menhinick. You all are just such a blessing and a gift as trans and queer people in Christian ministry who are changing and shaping and queering ministry, queering church, and queering how we think about wellness and spirituality. Thank you so much for everyone who joined in. Again, if your question did not get responded to, I'm saving the chat and we'll follow up with our speakers. You will get a link to this recording if you registered. It's also going to be posted on Facebook under Virginia-Highland Church, so take a peek there. But thank you so much to each of you for being here, for your presence. I'm wishing you joy, I'm wishing you love, and I'm wishing you levity, that some burdens may be lifted in your life as you go forth. Again, my name is Leo Shage Allen, and I serve as Minister of Faith and Justice at Virginia-Highland Church, and this has been an absolute privilege and pleasure for me. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you all have a good evening.